So we're super excited to have you here, all of the 14 participants that we have up to now. And today we're gonna talk about a very special topic, which is Sustainable Development Goals. So it is a very special topic for me and for IMAGINEi5 itself. So, and then also today is our last session with the COVID Accelerator. So yeah, we just wanted to end with a little bit of a dance and a little bit of a space to have fun and reflect and think about like the impact that we're doing here in the world, like just here in our little project, but how it extends and goes beyond to the world. Okay, so let's get started. So as you know, we're IMAGINEi5. We're a think tank dedicated to social impact for entrepreneurship in different spaces. And we are Sarah Kalek and Adriana Penuela. I am, as you know, the co-founder of IMAGINEi5. I'm a chemical engineering and I'm in the agricultural business. And I do volunteer with Engineers Without Borders around the world. And I am also a candidate at the UC Berkeley MBA and the VP of Social Impact. And Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I know we have a few new people here, so hi. Yeah. So outside of IMAGINEi5, and a lot of familiar faces too. Hi, Tina. Yeah. So outside of IMAGINEi5, I'm an engineer in the medical device industry, and I also act as a consultant in the medical device industry. And actually, how we met Adriana and I was through the MBA program at Berkeley.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started with the topic for today. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a little story. So I was in India traveling for fun because I love going to different places, and India was kind of like in my bucket list. And going around, I was at the airport. Nico and I my husband and I were at the airport in the long line while we see a huge sign that had like all of the 17 sustainable development goals. So to me, it was kind of like, wow, what is this? Like I had heard maybe a little bit about the Millennium Goals, but I had not like get them into my brain. But like these 17 goals were so like bright and like hit in so many like amazing problems, critical problems that we could solve and imagine for and make a difference, that it like got written into my brain. And I asked myself like, okay, how am I, like, what are these SDGs and what do they mean to me? Like, how do I see myself playing in this space, in this world that is so big and that needs so much love and tender love and care and beyond? So I started my journey there with the SDGs, and it has created like a really happy space for me to reflect. And I know this is not the airport in India. I just couldn't find the right picture from my files from back then in 2015. It is in Spanish, as you see, but it connects a little bit of who I am and why I care for around the world. So just with this start, I just wanted you to start thinking like, okay, what do these mean to you in particular? Because they have really made an impact on what I want to do in the future and when I see myself in the future as well. Okay, so just to ground us a little bit, so the SDGs are the Global Sustainable Development Goals, and they were developed from 2013 to 2015 based on the Millennium Goals, and they were part of the UN Sustainable Development Summit, and they were started in September 2015 by the 48 nations that sign up for it. So, and then I will pass it on to Fyodor whenever we're ready to explain a lot more about it, but that comes a little bit later. So now I just want you to watch this amazing video.
We can be. We must be the first generation to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
for everyone,
everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
Anywhere
lives in extreme poverty.
where no one
goes hungry.
where no one wakes in the morning asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die of disease.
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where
Everyone
goes to school. And education gives us the knowledge
And skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to thrive.
And be powerful and safe.
we cannot succeed if others can.
we will live in a world where all people can get clean water
And proper toilets
At home,
at school and at work.
we will live in a world where there's sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper
and new wealth
Lead to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world where prejudices and extremes of inequality are defeated.
inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
That are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume. Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back from climate
change. Where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas. Where we restore and protect
life on land,
The forests,
animals, the earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
Under justice, rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together
Partnerships of all kinds.
to make these global goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
So I don't know if you got the same feel that I had, but every time I watch this video, it makes me cry. It makes me like jump in my seat and get ready to start doing something of impact, something of change. And maybe reflecting back, like I'm already doing something. So like, let's connect that framework into what we're doing, to what is happening around the world in order to develop a world that really needs us, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts? Your thoughts about the video? Like maybe in the chat you can put a couple of your thoughts about the video. Like what do you see is going on around the world? Maybe Sarah, you can read a couple of the comments.
Yeah, for sure. So we got inspiring, many voices, you know, very powerful, and just a feeling of, somebody said it is just beautiful. Igde said that.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it is so inclusive, right? Because it is a 15-year plan for everyone, everywhere, and we're all in this earth for it. So it is a message that makes me chill and get excited and jump in my seat, and I don't know what else to do. But yeah, so let's see. Let's go to the next one. So looking at the Global Sustainable Development Goals, so the Stockholm Resilience Center developed this system that is a hierarchy of the Global Sustainable Development Goals. So what they say is that in the outer edges, there is the biosphere. So we're limited by the amount of resources that we have on this earth. So we have to take care of them through protecting the life on land, the life below water, providing clean and water and sanitation, and through climate action. Then after that, we have a society, which is something that is man-made. It is a condition that we created as humans. And in order for that society to thrive, we have to have affordable and clean energy, We need peace and justice and strong institutions. We need sustainable cities and communities. We want to protect and elevate the potential to reduce poverty. Also, we need good health and well-being, and we need quality education, gender equality, and we have to make sure that everyone has food to eat at their table. From there, it goes into the economies. So economies are embedded in the societies. So with the economies, like the SDG treats them as something that is allowing organizational change, right? So we have decent work and economic growth. We have industry, innovation, and infrastructure to allow us to thrive. We have the reduction of inequalities, and then we have responsible consumption and production. All of this cake cannot be done if we don't partner together. So that's number 17. It's partnership, and like it's essential to transform and make change. Okay, cool. So before we kickstart with the bulk of the discussion today, we just wanted to allow you to ask yourself a little bit like, okay, what is my carbon footprint and how does it look like? We found this from the WWF. It is a UK organization, so your results may be compared to the UK baseline. And sorry if you can send it in the chat. So we're gonna give you maybe 4 minutes to complete it. And then we'll have a quick discussion on what do you learn about and what do you see yourself like for yourself. So you have it in the chat now?
Yep, it's in the chat. I'll send it one more time.
Perfect. So it will take around like 4 minutes to get it completed. So we invite you to go ahead and complete it for yourself. And afterwards, we're gonna talk about what we learned. For myself, like not to distract you while you concentrate doing your work, but for myself, I learned a lot. So it seems like 11.2 tons is what I generate based on my patterns and my usage. So I know like it seems like a big bulk of my carbon footprint is coming from traveling. I do have a gas car. I do travel to see my family more than 5,000 kilometers a year. So maybe those, like that carbon footprint is the one that I have to take a closer look at and see like, okay, what else can I do in order to reduce it, right? So yeah, so think up, like after you do your quiz, there's gonna be like a beautiful result page, and you will see a wheel on what percentage you're spending the most carbon footprint on. And then if you click in one of those areas, it shows you some tips in order to help you understand like, okay, what can you do in order to offset it, or to maybe take different, like do different things in order to reduce it. And potentially these results for travel for myself were like pre-COVID, when I was driving to work 2 hours a day and all of that. But yeah, those are things that I could focus on. Right? And then the travel, maybe I can do some, less traveling or travel by train, even though seeing family in Florida will be really far. So we'll see, maybe like those kinds of things I can think of in order to make a difference. I like your comment, Leslie. The time is now for renewable energy. Everything is in place, so let's get ready to make a difference. Okay, can I get a thumbs up if you're done? Okay, so I'm gonna send you into breakout rooms to discuss what surprised you about your results and what will you challenge yourself on for this month. Okay, so okay, so maybe for today we're just gonna do it in the main room, the breakout. So we're using a new link and it changed. So we don't have breakout rooms for today. So now we have an open discussion.
It happens. So the question was, what surprised you about your personal results? Maybe if anybody would like to share. For me, I didn't realize, even though I would say that I have purchased carbon offsets and planted trees and stuff, I still was not meeting. I was not really compensating for everything that I was, extracting from the earth. So that was something that I need to do more about. What about you guys? Does anybody, one or two people, want to just hop on, unmute themselves?
Any other surprises?
Let's call on some people maybe. Tito, do you mind if we call on you?
Sure, yeah. So I get to work on this stuff, or I get to play with this stuff as part of my work. So one thing that I'm always curious about is, I mentioned in the chat, but food waste is something that I tend to think no, I don't have any food waste. But then when I start tracking it, it's oh yeah, I do. I think, to me, that the most important thing is always to approach this stuff with curiosity. I think that in the future, we will live in a more energy intensive world. I think that's a good thing. I hope that we continue to be an energy intensive society and we figure out a better place for that energy to come from than from stuff that's really hard to make, like fossil fuel kind of stuff. It's really, if you ever tried to make it, it's challenging. So yeah.
Thank you, Peter. What about Andrew? Do you get what surprised you?
Oh man, I joined a little late, so I'm just trying to catch up with what we're talking about. But I think what Tito said, the gallon of gasoline, 20 pounds of carbon dioxide, I drive a hybrid, so I guess that offsets it a little bit, but just knowing, what the effects are towards everything around us, just from doing drives or all these little things, and food waste as well. I just threw away a tomato that I had sitting here, and I realized buying more things that I need and the waste that I have, and on top of that, plastics and all that. Now that everything's an individual container in the world we're living in, is really looking at all the additional waste that we have. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for jumping in. Lucas, I see you have a hand raising.
Yeah. Thank you. I was surprised I was at 101%. I thought it'd be a lot more. And I think the quiz can be a lot more granular, especially since we're now, quarantined. Most of us, in seeing how many miles exactly are you driving? How much trash is there? And I think there's better proxies for asking that. But as the comments said, I think it's a good practice to really have everybody do this. And it'd be cool just to see if there's some sort of distribution of who's doing what. And another thing I wanted to mention is that when it comes to transportation, a lot of the energy we're putting in. Actually, there's a really good calculator for this. I'll put it in the chat later, of seeing how many lifestyle changes the whole world would need to do in order to hit the emissions targets and ultimately the temperature change targets. And I think one thing I wanted to mention is that lifestyle will only change so much, with 20 tons of carbon. But if you live as a hermit, right, you can get that down to 5. But that's a huge change, and you're only reducing 50 tons. Whereas, say, if you do a petition to prevent the construction of a coal power plant, that coal power plant would have created a net add of millions of tons of carbon dioxide. And if you're one of 10,000, if you a million divided by 10,000, it's still going to be more than would have saved by completely changing your life.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Lucas. Yeah, and go ahead and put the link in the chat so that we can all learn we're all in this journey together of learning together how to make a difference in the world. So thank you. I see a couple more comments in the chat. So we're gonna move on to the rest of the program for the sake of time. Okay. So we have our guest speaker here. So his name is Fyodor, and he is a social enterprise leader. So he's the co-founder and managing partner for the Institute for Evolutionary Leadership. And he also works at the Optima Business Bootcamp as a lead instruction, mentor, and board member. So he's making a difference, and he's looking to promote the just, sustainable, and flourishing world. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass it on to you, Fyodor, and yeah, let's get it started.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Yeah, as was already said, I'm Fyodor Ovchinnikov, and besides these two affiliations, the Institute for Evolution Leadership and Optima Business Bootcamp, I'm also a board member of the United Nations Association of the USA San Francisco chapter, and member of a couple of UN brain trusts through the Nexus community, and namely with UN Capital Development Fund and with UN Department of Oceans and Lloyd's Sea. So that's my kind of connection to the Sustainable Development Goals framework. And today I would like to share some thoughts, reflections, not necessarily factual information, but some framings, references, and examples that hopefully will be helpful for you as entrepreneurs. Because we don't have a lot of time, and with the internet, everybody can Google and everybody can read what the goals are, what the targets are. So I will just say a little bit about things that might not be as obvious. So when you know that, you might it might impact what you actually Google. So let's start with little history of the Sustainable Development Goals, and that is something that I learned through my brain trust affiliation. And I think that it's important to understand what the SDGs are and how they came together. The predecessors, as it was already said, were the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, and there was a problem with those goals. Those goals were developed by high-level experts at the UN the usual way, right? And they were for developing countries, so-called developing countries, right? And then the developed countries basically came to the developing countries and said, hey, we have goals for you, and you have to achieve those goals. And our support will depend on how well you are performing. And then developing countries basically were not happy about that, because when they were told that their priority should be, for example, to improve maternal health, some of them argued that they have extreme poverty and they have to focus on extreme poverty first, right? And then they don't have resources to improve maternal health. Things like that, right? So yeah, there was a discussion about developing countries not being listened to. And it was a huge challenge to actually get them on board. That is why, and if we can move to the next slide, please. That is why when the UN was working on the Sustainable Development Goals, they actually engaged much more countries. And they, first of all, engaged countries that are considered developing, and they also said that, okay, so we have global goals, we have global challenges, existential threats like climate change, for example, and it is not possible to address those challenges only by working with developing countries on those challenges. Developed countries have to make a commitment themselves. So instead of the traditional development paradigm where the rich kind of mentor the poor into happiness, it is the first attempt by the UN, as far as I understand, to actually bring countries together and share responsibility for the crisis, systemic crisis that we're in. which is very significant. So that's why Sustainable Development Goals are very different from MDGs, right? So they include all countries, and they also are made much more collaboratively. They were designed much more collaboratively. That said, an important point to understand is that this is a political framework. So it is a result of negotiations of different delegations with different interests. So if you notice some kind of contradictions within SDGs, and specifically the targets and the indicators, I encourage you to be kind to that framework because it is better than nothing. And there were certain compromises, of course, when this framework was put together. Another important point about the framework, sorry, just that slide, please. So basically, at this point, so the UN used to work, before that, the UN used to work primarily with governments of member states. And in recent years, it has been collaborating more actively with the civil society, and especially in the last few years with the private sector. That means that there are much more opportunities to engage directly with the UN as entrepreneurs. For example, the UN Capital Development Fund that I mentioned, it was established just 2 years ago, and it's doing impact investing. So the UN is now doing impact investing as well. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. As you know, there are 17 goals, and there was a wonderful video that you watched. I won't go through all of them, but they cover different areas of society and environment. And then there are 169 targets. So a lot of people know about the goals, but much fewer people know about the targets. And if you figure out which goals you're working on with your project or business, then I encourage you to actually read what targets are set for that particular goal. And then there are indicators. So there are global indicators that are updated every year. And there are also national indicators and regional indicators that are developed by member states and by experts locally. If you're working in a specific region, then also it makes sense to look for what kind of indicators local experts are setting for this particular region. Also, I noticed that one of you, I think Laura, prepared some presentation about the SDGs and the data. So I encourage you to engage in some peer learning and ask for that presentation. Okay. So please, next slide. So that's the framework, the UN SDGs, and in particular, I would like to notice that there is partnership for the SDGs, which is really the core of achieving the SDGs, and the concept of no one left behind basically encourages everyone to work together and identify specific stakeholders who might be left out from the progress. For example, UN Capital Development Fund is particularly concerned in uplifting communities in the least developed countries, in the least developed part, in kind of the poorest parts of the least developed countries, as we call it. I have some further comments on that, but I won't share it here. Just letting you know that it's really a targeted outreach effort to include everyone. Okay, next slide, please. So please move on. Yeah, targets, and next one. Yeah, so you can basically look at the targets. It's been a lot of work that went into the visualization and organizing the data, so you can actually explore this on your own. And again, there are 17 goals, and there are even more targets and indicators. So identify which goals you're working on and explore those specific goals yourself. Please go ahead. Next slide. So SDGs, paradoxes, and bottlenecks. So the framework is really great in terms of mobilizing people around the world. It's kind of a common language, and there is political will behind that language. So there are resources moving around to support SDGs, and there are informational campaigns to mobilize people to work on those SDGs. It's a great framework. It's a great mobilizing tool, and it also helps coordinate efforts. But there are certain paradoxes and bottlenecks. So first of all, goals are interconnected and at times contradicting. So if you look at economic growth, for example, and climate action, how does that relate? And of course, you can say that we are for responsible economic growth that actually does not contribute too much to climate change. But if you look at the actual work that's going on the ground, these two goals are very often at odds. So there are some contradictions, and there are even some academic articles pointing out to some fundamental contradictions within the SDG framework. And at the same time, also, they are interconnected. So as we will see in one of our examples, it's very hard to just address one SDG. And of course, today, we will ask you to identify one SDG, but just for the sake of the exercise. So I actually strongly encourage you to think about other SDGs that your venture might be affecting, even though you might be working on one primary SDG, but it's almost never the only one. When you actually have interconnected SDGs, it means that you might not necessarily be able to make significant impact without partnerships and collaboration. Because you might provide, for example, some healthcare services looking for addressing healthcare, and the systemic factors that actually impact the health of the community health are linked to poverty, for example, and environmental issues. And you're only providing healthcare services, your impact would be buried under the negative impact of the other areas. So I encourage you to be kind to the framework when you see contradictions, but also acknowledge that they do exist. Also acknowledge the interconnectedness of the goals. And even if you are focusing on one of them, look at other areas that might impact what you're doing, and that also be impacted by what you're doing. Two, these goals are global and local at the same time. So there are issues like that cannot be tackled, one region at a time. There needs to be global collaboration on those issues, and at the same time, every region is different. So the solutions that you use for one region might not necessarily be relevant for another region. So you have to hold both pictures in your head, right? So the local picture, or maybe multiple regions if you were working across regions, and then local and then a global picture as well, because many of these are global. Tangible yet aspirational. And I just had a question about the data again. So the data are good, but and it's good to have some tangible goals, right? Some tangible indicators to look at, and some deliverables. But at the same time, so first of all, these indicators are not necessarily relevant for all the regions. And I recently talked with some economists from Russia, for example, and they are struggling with translating global indicators into the local environment because of some very specific statistical things, just how statistics are handled in Russia. We need to be aware of that and look at data as valuable information, as valuable kind of input, but also make sure that we listen to stakeholders and do qualitative assessment as well as quantitative assessment. The goals are also aspirational. So there are certain goals like reversing climate change, for example. It might not be possible. We given the current trends, we're pretty much behind in many aspects of that. And we still have to try to reach that goal and not be discouraged by slow progress or lack of progress. Some goals are more aspirational than others, and some are more tangible than others. And we need to actually hold that paradox of these goals being more tangible and aspirational. And then competitive or colonial mindset of key actors. That's a hard topic to talk about because it's still, even though we see a lot of progress with the framework, especially compared to Millennial Development Goals, I definitely see some radical shifts in how the institutions work in some places, but I also see a lot of corruption, greenwashing, and kind of this mindset that we know better, and that we want to be the saviors of the world, as instead of we want the world to actually do well. With this, I encourage you to actually listen to those affected by what you're doing, and collaborate a lot. It's not just about competitive advantage for sustainable social enterprise. It is about, in the first place, if it's a purpose-driven enterprise, and in the first place, it's about listening to the stakeholders and identifying what is valuable for them and how they see things, and bringing, of course, your vision into the picture, but acknowledging the agency of people you're affecting with what you're doing. And then 5, inadequate support structures. What we at the Institute for Evolution Leadership have found out is that a lot of local leaders actually are intuitively creating solutions that are super helpful. But at the same time, when they want to scale that or make it more effective, they ask for funding or they ask for mentorship. They want to join some programs. And unfortunately, the way this funding structured, both investment and philanthropy, is not necessarily adequate, because it's pretty much predatory still and low context. So we need more higher context capital, and we need to acknowledge that business models that are good for the community might not be necessarily the most attractive for investors and vice versa. Let's go to the next one, and then we'll handle questions later. Just want to make sure I cover the key points. Some positive structural shifts, major shifts in political will in some of the mainstream institutions, including the UN. Again, I wouldn't overestimate that. There is still a long way to go. But there probably will be some kind of UN reform. We'll see what will happen at the General Assembly in September. All the signs are that, there will be some major changes in the UN system, hopefully towards more transparency, accountability, and more democratic approach, and more collaborative approach. But we'll see. And obviously, there are funds available for kinds of solutions that were not part of the mainstream even 5, 6 years ago. It's really shifting, both finance and political will. Growing prototypes of systemic solutions. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of grassroots solutions that are really awesome. Accelerated learning, obviously with the internet and, the accessibility of learning and peer learning through Zoom calls and different other online formats, actually accelerate in-network and cross-network learning of different impact-driven initiatives, purpose-driven initiatives locally. So there could be actually translocal coordination that is very high context, very relational, and very effective. And then 4 new forms of funding. So I'll mention, traditionally, basically, traditionally, investors want exits maybe in 3 to 5 years when they invest in a startup, for example. Some social enterprises work with issues that require much longer before any returns are available. So Hito Verde, for example, a regenerative forestry company in Mexico, they secured core investors, anchor investors for 100 plus years, to families that are investing for their grandchildren, basically. And now they're able to invite other investors to join for part of the journey for maybe 10 plus years or so. So you see the timeframes are shifting. Collaborative funding is very popular now. A lot of prototypes, including, for example, Thriving Resilient Communities Collaboratory, in collaboration with Threshold Foundation, when grassroots organizations actually collaboratively distribute funding amongst each other through dialogue. And they don't actually have to submit very expensive reports with metrics that might not necessarily be relevant to what they're doing. So there is a lot more trust between the funders and the community of grassroots organizations now. These are just some examples. There are definitely more alternative funding options. Next slide, please. So this is something that's Sarah put together, is wonderful representation of the interconnectedness. And yes, COVID-19 is connected to all the SDGs. And they're connected with each other anyway. So since you're working on COVID-19 related solutions, obviously you would probably look at healthcare, right? So the health issues, but also justice, right? Inequalities, because some groups are affected more than others. Also environmental field, because some environmental factors are connected to the impact of COVID-19, and of course economic growth and all that, because the economies are suffering. So that is a reminder to keep in mind that everything is connected. Yeah, great. So here is an example, Health in Harmony, and I wish you guys used my slides with my additions. Because there was a logo of our partners at University of Melbourne Asia Pacific Social Impact Center that is now rebranded, but it used to be a leading center for researching business models for social impact. And my friend, Dr. Krzysztof Dembek, in particular, was working on this project on identifying new types of business models that are very effective for addressing systemic challenges. Health in Harmony is one of their case studies, and you can Google it. You can find a lot of information about it. They started by trying to save orangutans in Borneo, and then they realized that the main reason why the orangutans were endangered is because of deforestation. And then they started looking even deeper into that, and they figured out that the community actually contributed a lot to deforestation by cutting trees illegally because they needed money. And one of the main reasons why they needed money is because of the healthcare bills were enormous. The healthcare system was extractive, and the more they paid for healthcare, the more money they need to get. The more trees they cut, the worse the community health became in general. The more money they had to pay for healthcare. So that was a vicious cycle. The solutions that they've developed over the last few years include a hospital that provides 70% discount to those who are not cutting trees illegally. We also have a network of volunteers actually informing them on who is cutting trees illegally so that they can keep track of that. But also, if you cut trees illegally, it doesn't mean you cannot afford healthcare because you can pay with seedlings in lieu of money. So if you do harm, you can actually get access to affordable healthcare by repairing the harm, by growing more trees. And in addition to that, they provided services, educational services to the community, teaching alternative ways of agriculture that didn't require cutting trees, and also alternative livelihoods to the local community. Besides that, they are now working with youth and have a bunch of other programs. But what you can see is that they started with one SDG, right? Life on land. And then they started working on connected SDGs. And by developing several solutions, and now these are several organizations that spinned off of the original organization. They have different leadership, but they're collaborative and they're actually working towards the same goal. They were able to provide very tangible impact. But an important thing about them is that they spent 400 hours on just listening before they even started. And they listened to all stakeholders, not just target customers, not just customer segments. They listened to local communities very intensively. And so they developed an emerging strategy, something that that is not based on a prediction of what theory of change will actually work, but they worked in partnership with the community to develop something that would address the complex issue they cared about. Okay, so next slide, please. Criticism, that is something.
I just sent Adriana another link. There was just some issues with saving, so it's on a new link here, and Adriana will share that instead. Sure. Sorry about that, Fedor.
Sure. Yeah. So what I wanted to show is the references. And yeah. Why purpose-driven entrepreneurs should be interested in SDGs. So again, this is a great framework that mobilizes a lot of different stakeholders, including the private sector. So you'd be able to engage in public-private partnerships, engage with the UN, then be able to communicate what you're doing in a much more effective way using this global language. Then communication and prioritizing tools, public relations, right? And then funding, of course. Grants, loans, investment opportunities. A lot of those are now attached to the SDGs. And by knowing which SDGs you're addressing and how, you'll be able to tap into those opportunities. The references, please. Yeah. Feel free to contact me and ask your questions if we don't have time for your questions today. Then Institute for Evolution Leadership. So that's my primary affiliation. We do leadership development for systemic change, educational programs primarily, but we also do fellowship programs with place-based systemic change leaders. And so, I'd be happy to share any contacts that might be relevant for what you're doing. UN Sustainable Development Goals, obviously, and you'll get more from the organizers. And then the most important thing is that if you're interested in health and harmony and their what is called reorganizing business models, you can read the original academic article by Dr. Dembek and others, creating value for multiple stakeholders, sustainable business models at the base of the pyramid. Yeah, and I guess that's it. So just again, the message here is that the UN Sustainable Development Goals is a political framework that it would be very useful for you to learn about. And don't forget that there are targets and indicators. And also, please, I encourage you to acknowledge the interconnectedness of the goals. And I encourage you to think about the real impact that you're having with what you're doing, and make sure you're not trying to bring a solution that would ensure that you're creating a sustainable enterprise, but your impact actually would not be a genuine contribution towards sustainable development goals. And with that, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. If we have a couple of burning questions, maybe Sarah, you can ask those questions. Otherwise, I would just give it to you if you want to do a breakout session.
Yeah, thanks, Fyodor. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but I appreciate that you gave the email. And if anybody has questions, please email him, Fyodor, directly, or you can go to IMAGINEi5.com and you can send us a message, and we will keep you updated with Fyodor. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
So if you can go to the next slide, if you don't mind, Adriana. So for the breakout room, well, we're just going to have a general discussion just for a few minutes. If you could identify one SDG that your business solution is tackling, or anything that you're working on. As Fyodor mentioned, you will not be just focusing on one SDG. All of these are very connected. So any action that you take is going to affect another. But we would like to know, as of right now, when you just see these SDGs at a high level, I just identify one and let's just put it into the chat. Also, the second question here is, if your venture reaches its highest potential, what impact are you aspiring to have in that area? If you have a few minutes to write that out, we would love to see that too. So we see Carlo says good health and well-being. Tito, climate action. Awesome. Ari, is that Ari? Awesome. Climate action.
It's pretty cool because, like, what are you today and were you envisioning the SDG that is affecting today? But then, like, what do you see it affecting in the future? Is it the same? Like, do you want to keep it consistent, or, yeah, you want to, like, what is the extent of the impact that you want to make? And think global, think local, think where you at.
Awesome. So we see Anne says good health and well-being. Tom, zero hunger. And Carlos says impact is social stabilization, as geopolitical has, we got a lot of people commenting. Thank you. I lost this. Okay, for health, economic growth from Arti, related to poverty. Zero poverty, partnerships for the goals, definitely. So zero disease from Jamie from Chowbanga. And so thank you all very much. We love seeing all the work that you all are doing. We would love to talk more. Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here, so we're going to keep moving forward. So our call to action off of this is we want to focus today. So how can you be an agent of positive change? Today, we're focusing on the biosphere, so on the climate action piece specifically, just because that's the foundation for quite a few of the other SDGs. So we're going to be providing a link so where you can see the things that you can do to take action for each one of the the SDGs. But today, if you don't mind, Adriana, go to the next slide. Today, we actually just want you to just take one step and make one choice around these 4 options. Or, you can create your own option, but, one, if you could put it into the chat, or do an annotation directly onto the slide. Which one are you going to choose? The first one is avoid eating meat for 1 day per week for the next month. The second is a carbon offset 1 month of travel. And there's an organization called Project Wren, which will do carbon offsets. The third is planting a tree in your area. And the fourth, and I'll provide you guys with a link for that too. And the fourth is talking about climate change. And the UN SDGs with your friends and family. Awesome. So we see a lot of people here. And I think I want to bring up a point that Lucas had said earlier, each individual taking a step will not produce as much change as, us coming together and really including our corporations and our overall environment within the conversation. So I think that's a very important piece as well. It's not just in our hands as individuals, but it's in our hands as a whole community. So thank you, Lucas, for stating that. I think I want to highlight that as well. So awesome. We see here, many people, some people have chosen to not eat meat for a day for the next month, talking to friends. And here I'm actually going to provide you guys with some links about more information for each of these SDGs and how you can communicate.
Yeah, and think of something that you're not currently doing. So it is a challenge to do something different, some good new experience in order to just save the planet. So if you're already like balancing out in that quiz, yeah, you can make the movement towards being lighter on the environment as well. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna keep going forward. So let's send these slides, Adriana, if you don't mind, and we'll send these slides to you and post them on COVID Accelerator, so you guys can click through, and each of these images, it's linked to the UN SDG specifically. All right, so in the last few minutes, the last minute, we just want to tell you all thank you so much, and thank you to the COVID Accelerator team, Tito, Ari, Tom, John, Tessa. All of you guys have been, and everybody else, all of you guys have been very good to us. And thank you to Fyodor as well as a speaker. But thank you all for having us every week, and then every other week, most recently, for us to host these workshops. We've had a really beautiful journey from April to August. So it's been fun. Please do stay in touch with us. You can see we actually have a description of each of our workshops on the IMAGINEi5 website. So reach out to us if you need a workshop, or you just want to talk about, prototyping, ideation, diversity, equity, inclusion. We have had a variety, so you can see them all there. Adrienne, do you mind going to the next slide? So on our site, you can subscribe and stay connected. And we actually just recently posted 3 opportunities as a part of IMAGINEi5. The first is artist or illustrator, and we have a description for that too on the site. Business development and foresight strategist. So if you're interested, please go onto our site, either subscribe or sign up for one of these, apply for one of these opportunities. And then finally, if you haven't already, you want to check out the COVID Accelerator, please go to covidaccelerator.com. This is their website. And just again, thank you so much, Tito and Ari, and everybody that we've met along the way. It's been a lot of fun for us, and we've grown a lot too. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming to us every week, and since March or April. Yeah, it has been a really enjoyable journey. So thank you so much, and we'll see you around.
And thank you, Fyodor. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.